All right, welcome to the Sound Off, everybody. I'm so excited. Our two guests today joining us, Ben Thompson and Jason Cornwell. I'm going to share a little bit about each of them. Jason Cornwell is a nationally respected trainer and practitioner in options-based safety and crisis response, helping school communities move beyond compliance-based training towards skill building that empowers staff and students to respond effectively in real-world situations. Through his work with us here at Safe and Sound Schools and the Staying Safe program, Jason has supported districts across the country in strengthening situational awareness, decision making, and coordinated response, turning preparation into practical capability. Joining Jason today is Ben Thompson, Assistant Superintendent from Frederick County Public Schools in Virginia, who brings the district leadership perspective on what it's like to implement options-based training at scale and to begin thinking about how to sustain it over time. Ben's seen firsthand how staying safe has shifted culture, confidence, and readiness across the community. In today's episode, we'll dig into what options-based training really means, why it matters in today's school safety landscape, and what success looks like when preparation translates into action. So, Jason and Ben, I am really excited to dig in. This is it's one of my favorite things to talk about is empowering people, especially empowering our students. So we'll get into the topic of options-based training, but let's break the ice first. So would each of you share your superpower? What is that weird, quirky, interesting little factoid about each and every one of you that most people wouldn't know, but they should? Can I start with you, Ben?
Sure. So it's so great to be here with you today, and really enjoy the conversation. So for me, it's something that I probably started about maybe when I was first principal. It really became maybe just necessary for me. So I'm a uniform guy, and very routine oriented and limit decision making where I can. And so every day, what I will tell you in my current role, you will find me with a blue dress shirt on it, tie, and khaki pants, and then a coat when needed. All right. And so that only changes on Fridays. And on Fridays, it'll be the same color khaki pants, the exact same brand, the same size and everything. And then I put on a school shirt or a department shirt for the departments that I'm charged with leadership. So just something that I did. It makes my mornings a little easier and a little less stressful. And so it just a little quirky thing about me. So
I love this for several reasons. Like from a safety standpoint, it will always be very easy to identify you. I appreciate that. But I think also I love what you said about, I mean, gosh, our school leaders have so many decisions to make. The decision fatigue is real. Let's save that cognitive energy for the important things and let's just streamline whatever we can. I love it. That's great. All right, Jason, I already know you're in a uniform. So, I mean, you're kind of ahead of the curve.
Yeah, I get to beat out Ben. It's the same uniform every day. I'm just fortunate to be here. I thank you for allowing me to be here and be part of this. And as you know, Ben and I have been friends for many years, so it's wonderful to have him here with me. I guess something that a lot of people don't know about me, other than my normal duties here as a school safety division leader, is I've been part of our SWAT team here for 24 years. Probably, I think I'm the longest standing SWAT team guy, maybe in Virginia. I've been a SWAT team leader for 9 of those years. So I think superpower wise, I really focus a lot for me is mindset and training, because I'm a big believer that our body is not going to go where our mind hasn't already been. So I have a very young son and a 27-year-old. My youngest son is 5. So even at 5 years old, I believe that mindset and training every day, just being prepared for whatever we face through that mindset. I believe we can start instilling that at a very young age, all the way through, our SWAT team, and that's what I try to do all the time.
Yeah, I love that because, and we'll talk about this as we get down into the nitty gritty, but when we talk about what's appropriate for the variety of youth that we serve in our schools, and let's face it, adults in our schools too, we kind of lean into to you and your sons as examples, right? We can start with the youngest, so young, 5 years old, right? And then we can talk about your what now, high schooler, maybe middle school, high
Middle
school,
school,
middle
13.
school. Okay, then you've got an adult son, and then you've got you as an adult professional, right? And I think being able to express that scale in our conversation is critically important. We're not training our kids like we're training you. we're not we're not approaching our 5-year-olds like we are your middle school son, right? And so that's really important context to bring to the conversation. So let's kind of start at the top. Let's define for folks what we're talking about. Plenty of our listeners know about options-based training. They know it has been recommended by our major federal agencies, Department of Education, Department of Homeland Security, as a way that we need to begin thinking about preparedness. But a lot of folks kind of get lost in what exactly are we talking about? What is options-based training? So let's start there. What does it mean, and how is it a deviation from the way we used to do things in terms of how we used to train people? You want to start that, Jason?
Yeah. So I think the way we've always trained people is we have these set responses. Like if this happens, you have to do this. And we use lockdown as an example. When you go into lockdown, you have to lock your door. You have to turn out the lights. You have to make it look quiet. But the problem with that is sometimes it's, what if we're not in a room? What if we don't have it in that neat little package with a bow on it that we can do those things? So we move from that preset response, like this is the only thing we can do, to we try to create critical thinkers, and we try to give people tools in their tool belt. Because what tool you use right now for this job may not work in 30 seconds. So what's the next tool that I can use that somebody's given me throughout my life to stay safe? That's what critical thinking is. That's what options-based training is you now have autonomy to use tools in your tool belt to identify the crisis and identify what is the best response in this crisis to help me stay safe.
Mm-hmm. It is a big change. And Ben and I kind of came up in the same cohort, right? So we're definitely from that if then generation, right? If this is happening, then this is what we're supposed to do. We kind of have our flow charts and our factor trees, and as educators, that's what a lot of us are really, just give me the answer. Let me know what I'm supposed to do, and I will study for that test. But as you point out, Jason, crisis is totally unpredictable. We don't know. And unfortunately, what I think I've observed, and Ben, you share if this is something that you have seen in and among your school communities. A lot of people aren't necessarily comfortable with if then, because they know they watch the news, right? They know about various crises and tragedies like ours in Newtown, and they see how if then isn't quite good enough, right? That we can't actually script how a crisis is going to play out.
Yeah, it's very interesting because I think all too often, or a lot of times, what happens is you get into a crisis situation and people just want to revert to, like, if then this is what I do. But there's too many what ifs in a situation, right? And people need to be able to react in a situation with the information in front of them. And much like what Captain Cornwell shared, having that ability to critically think and make a decision and understand that we're going to support you, right? Like, we're going to support you as leaders for reacting and making the best decision you could with the information at hand and in front of you is just, it's so valuable for the safety of our kids and our school community. And, oftentimes I'm brought back to one of the movies that I've watched is, the whole Sully and the Hudson River situation where where they had to land the plane on the Hudson. And there was all these conversations about, well, could he have gotten back to an airport? Could he have gotten back to an airport? And the reality is, it's not a computer. We're not computers, right? And so we're going to make the best decisions we can with the information that we have in front of us. And guess what? It's not going to be perfect. And that's okay. We have to make the best decisions we can at the time, and not just purely go back to, this is what's in front of me, this is how I react, because we don't know in training all the nuances that are a part of that situation that's in front of you at that time.
Yeah, well said. I mean, I know a lot of the anxiety I would hear from classroom teachers, for example, is okay, if we're going to have this if then very prescribed sort of path for various situations, and like then I would get a lot of what ifs, right? Like what if kind of a deal. And so I think what you shared though with the example of Sully is just such a good one, because we are not computers, right? We can practice and tabletop and discuss and plant all the good seeds that we possibly can, and we'll continue to try to grow our mindset. But I think for a lot of school folks, the concern is, what if I'm not making the right choice? Like, I want to know the right answer. I want to make the right choice, and that can lead to a little bit of a paralysis, like a decision paralysis. Like I don't want to make the wrong choice, so I'm not going to make a choice. And what would you say, Jason, to that very real phenomenon? I think.
It is a phenomenon, but I do feel educators are willing to make that shift because we get those questions all the time. They are thinking that they see these responses that they're supposed to have, but they realize quickly like that may not always work, and it's very difficult, like Ben said, for us to be able to script every type of response that's out there. Because every classroom looks different, every hallway looks different, every school looks different, every door that you exit, the outside looks a little different. So I go back to, we have to allow people to be critical thinkers. We have to allow them to adapt to the situation they're presented with tools that we give them, and say, listen, I need you to make the right decision based off the situation you're faced with. I hope that answered your question. Or
Yeah. No, absolutely. It has been interesting to see how that shift in thinking and opening up this conversation. It's almost like the elephant's been sitting in the room with us for decades, right? And we've been skirting in a lot of classrooms and hallways and school communities this really difficult conversation, because there are not a lot of good answers, right? There's not a clean cut, perfect answer. And opening up the conversation, leaning into some of those really difficult questions with staff, and inviting them to be part of it, inviting them and our students to contribute ideas and thinking, has been kind of amazing to watch that unfold a bit. I know, Ben, as you have explored this in kind of sort of small pockets, sort of test pockets, if you will, in your own community, what has that looked like?
Yeah, so we're very, very blessed to have a very strong relationship with the sheriff's office, and I will just go and say I believe it's very unique, and I understand that, and there's not a day that goes by that I am not vastly appreciative of that relationship. So really, what it is all about is having conversations with Captain Cornwell and his team, and really working together for what it is, the betterment for our community, and ultimately the most important thing, our kids. And so it's that conversation of about, hey, is this something we want to explore? Is this the right thing to do for our community, our kids? And then looking at using our leadership skills and knowledge to implement it at a pace which is not overwhelming to our folks, so that we get good fidelity with our implementation, and we get good buy-in from our teams and from our staff. And so really what I would say is that focus on working with Captain Cornwell and his team, and really laying out that plan of getting those early adopters to the table to implement the strategy or the strategy at hand, and then kind of identifying how we're going to roll it out and what is our timeline for that with all of our other initiatives that we know we have. And of course, in a school division our size of roughly 14,000 students, we have a lot of instructional initiatives as well. And so how do we time those so that it is implemented with fidelity, like I said, and making sure that we're not overburdening or overloading our teams and our schools. And so really just kind of balancing that out and ultimately knowing that safety is the top priority. Without safe schools, we don't have schools. And I'm a firm believer of that. You have decreased attendance rates if the school does not feel safe to kids. And that's an important thing I just touched on there. Not just is it safe, but do kids feel like it's safe? And is the perception that it's a safe school? And so we have to make sure that we have that so that ultimately we have a well-rounded school community.
Well said. And Jason, having been a part of, bringing options-based training to a lot of different schools now, in your own area, as well as across the country with us and of our Staying Safe program and curriculum, what have you seen in terms of, how that mindset shift has really transformed the way students are talking about safety, the way staff is talking about safety, and those conversations that Ben's pointing to, where of course we all want everyone to be physically safe, but striking that balance of actually helping people to feel safe and empowered. Thoughts on that?
For me, students have these questions. They've been talking about it for a long time. I just don't know that we've had good answers for a long time. We've been willing to train adults and give them options, but really, I think people were hands off with students. And if they weren't hands off, maybe they were providing guidance or ideas that look different around the country. And what the hope is to give students options-based approach that has fidelity, like Ben said, that is consistent, but not only make them feel safe in school, but give them tools and make them feel safe wherever they go, because we know tragedies don't just happen in schools, they can happen anywhere. So if we provide our students life skills to be safe anywhere that they go, we're ahead of the curve. And I think I've been fortunate to be part of some training sessions, not only with the adults, but with the students. Students are very engaged with this. They're going to ask a lot of questions. They're going to have all kinds of ideas. And while we want to honor some of those ideas, we can maybe ground them a little better or bring them back to say, hey, I hear what you're saying, but have you thought about this? This might be a better solution. And just getting them that mental preparation, like we talked about from at the very beginning. We're not asking them to run towards gunfire. We're just asking them to be safe. And we don't need to give them sensorial things that traumatize them. We just need them to think, if I'm not safe, how can I be safe? And I think students are really ready to have those conversations.
So let's talk a little bit, Jason, about some examples of that. So what are we talking about here? Let's dive a little bit deeper into what are the tools in the tool belt that we're talking about with kids. And let's take the littles, for example. Let's start with the hardest, right? The group that we're probably the most nervous about scaring. So what would you say to your 5-year-old son? What kind of tools in the tool belt, what kind of options are we providing for an unsafe situation?
Yeah, so I would keep those very, very, very simple. And again, not giving any sensorial information. We don't even have to talk about an active attacker. We just tell them, if your area is unsafe, have those conversations. Where could we go to be safe? How can we get to those areas? Getting them in a school to see areas that they may, under normal circumstances, not get to see, because if they are getting out of danger and they run into an area, we want that area to look familiar. Maybe in an office area behind the desk. Well, I've never been back there before, but that was their escape route. That we want them to see that ahead of time. So getting out of danger. And if there's danger outside, again, we're just getting out of danger. We may come back inside If we can't get away from danger, how do we keep danger away from us? If we're in a classroom and it's dangerous outside, again, not painting any type of scary picture, but what can we use to keep our area safe? Is it simply locking a door? Do I know how to lock that door? Have I ever locked that door previously? Because the first time, if it's not an automatic lock, I don't want them to try to figure out how to lock that door in a crisis. They need to know how it works. Could we move something in front of that door to keep it from opening? And then lastly, could I hide out from danger? Now, we know we've done a lot of work with our friends in the fire department. We don't want to hide out if it's a fire, but there are other reasons we can hide out. And if we pre-plan those escape routes or those hideout places, we're going to be a lot more successful when the crisis happens.
Yeah. And I think people, the words, right, Ben? I mean, you're as an educator, the words are different for different groups. So we talk about the littles as Jason kind of walked us through: get out, keep out, hide out. Super simple, single syllable words, right? But as the kids get older, some of the other verbiage, the other language that we might expand to. Do you want to talk a little bit about the importance of the words that we choose?
Yeah. So, I mean, more than anything, I think the most important piece in any kind of school safety training is that we don't create traumatic environments. At the end of the day, we don't create we don't do more harm than good, because while the chances in terms of percentages of one of these events happening to any single student is exceedingly rare, the reality is they do happen, so we have to train for them. But at the end of the day, we have to strike that balance of being prepared, but not creating a traumatic environment, a traumatic experience for our youth. And so, kind of that old adage of no drama, no trauma is so important as we kind of, teach school safety and train kids to react. So it's really got to be age appropriate. Like, as the kids get older, you can give them a little bit more and a little bit more, but ultimately you don't want to give too much, because you don't know what each individual kid's experience is, right? And so you don't know the prior traumas that they've experienced either at their home or at school. So, enough to get the information across, but not so much that it creates that sense of fear and things of that nature. As long as kids are trained and have a general idea of what they need to do, they're going to rise to the occasion. They're going to rise to the level of their training that they've had. They don't need all the in small in particulars that create a big scene of the event, so to speak.
Yeah, and I think I love how we talk about no drama, no trauma all the time, and that it's easy to remember, right? And it just brings us back to the reality. And Jason pointed to this: we don't actually need to paint a picture. We don't need the sensorial. We don't need to make this experiential for anybody, because what we do now know is that there's great risk of causing harm, of causing trauma, and of causing that kind of freeze and that paralysis that we don't want to see. We want to create all the neural pathways for problem solving. And I think what we're seeing in some of these communities, and Jason, I'd love for you to share what are some of the kind of maybe cultural changes or improved responses that you have seen in some of the school communities where this has rolled out with students and staff. I'm thinking specifically of that one particular private school in Virginia being so small, how their rollout was a bit quicker than, say, Ben's able to look at in a larger district. So it's kind of a nice little microcosm and an example of a cultural change, a mindset shift, and really a shift in how they respond to any kind of crisis.
Yeah, so the school district or the private school you're thinking of has around 200 students from pre-K to 12th grade. And we started with those conversations, and the director there is very proactive in school safety. And she knew this right away. She's like, we wanted to give students options because their campus is spread out. Some of it's in trailers, some of it's in or modular classrooms. Some of it's in an old pavilion that they made into classrooms, and then some of it is in their built off of a church. And so there was a lot of movement within that campus, and she wanted to give her students the options-based approach to say, hey, no matter where you are on your campus, you have to make a decision how to be safe if you're in a crisis. And they use SRP, and they are able to make those announcements throughout their campus, but she also wanted them to have tools in their tool belt. So we had those conversations, and we rolled that out at parent night, where we talked to the parents of why this was important to do. Got the parents on board very quickly, gave them information about the staying safe training. And then we did a train the trainer course. And what they decided was they picked individual teachers that they felt were very strong with the training. And they started training at a very young level, kindergarten level, like week one, going right into school. They just started out, it's just simple. If you are in danger, how can we get out of danger? Just those one thing a week, all the way up through high school, middle school. They did a 45-minute training on just discussion of what are your options-based approaches. And then they had discussions like, what could we use? How could we get out of here? And they would give them tabletop exercises. If you were in chapel, what does chapel look like? How many exits are in chapel? While we gave them the tools, man, they really expounded upon that and thought outside the box and brought all their teachers together. And they were able to create many different thinking activities, tabletop activities for all grade levels. And the Staying Safe curriculum is across that campus. And we believe it has empowered them because they don't have an SRO. And that was when they were talking to the kids, like, what concerns you about safety here? And it's like, well, we don't have an SRO. Okay, so what can we do to empower you? And these staying safe options really, we're able to give them the autonomy and self-empowerment to say, okay, I can make a decision to be safe, even if I'm by myself and I'm in any situation.
Yeah. And just keeping it super simple, right? We're just looking at how do we avoid or deny or disrupt a dangerous situation. Or for the littles, I love they made little tool belts themselves, with their choices of get out and keep out and hide out, and played games. So sort of had their own version of tabletops where they were kind of holding up their cards for what they thought was the best option. If we smell smoke or if we learn that there is a wild dog outside on campus, very age appropriate. So it's just amazing to see how that rolled out in the schools.
Yeah, I got to watch their kindergarten class, and they get to do the tool belt, and the teacher would just give them, just like you said, there's scenarios, and to watch the kids, how much they enjoyed trying to figure out like what is the best tool for this, and then they would talk about that, and even to say, if our classroom was safe, what objects could we use in here to move in front of the door to help keep it safer, to keep danger outside? And they did a great job. At a kindergarten level, they were already able to process this.
Exactly. Just leaning into knowledge that they have, knowledge that they have, and thinking of it in a different way. So Ben, Jason talked about SRP. I'd love for you to back up, if you will, because I know you have SRP in your school district, and just, share with folks about that institutional level protocols and how that relates to this kind of thing where we're talking about a personal set of options, that come in the form of options-based training.
Yeah, certainly. So, really the focus with SRP is a guidance, right? And so this is as an individual, based off of the situation that they're dealing with in front of them, they make a decision, right? And so we're going to react with a whole secure based off of the information that they have. But the information they have there is different than the information a person has all the way at the other end of the building, or maybe, right? And so they have to be able to react and understand that, wow, this is the guidance and the way we need to react here at this time, taking into account the additional information I have right in front of me, I need to essentially go a different direction. And that's okay. We have to realize that the person that's closest to the decision, they're closest to the situation, has to be able to act and make a decision in really anything, but especially in emergency situations. And so, from here, from my office, as the assistant superintendent, I would never reach out and say, hey, you need to react this way during an emergency at school. At most, what would happen is I would go to the situation and offer support. I think, most of the time, what I'm looking at is looking at it on a video screen to be able to see how I can react and support those folks in the situation at that time if needed. But we hire great individuals, react in great ways, and we have to trust them to make those decisions. We trust them with our kids' safety and security every single day. We certainly need to be able to trust them in situations that are right in front of them, that are just safety and security decisions on a daily basis. And so for us to tell them that they need to do something else based off of what we see without all the knowledge it's just silly to think that we could do that.
Yeah, yeah. And I think, you're referring to that like in the moment, like, folks, if they are literally in the middle of crisis, being empowered to make their own, decisions in their own best interest. And so that's really that kind of options based part that's for the person in the moment. But at that district level, right? So you would call according to standard response protocol, which by the way comes from a foundation called I Love You Guys. You can easily find them online and learn more about the standard response protocol. I would venture that for those of you who haven't heard of it, you will probably discover that your school or district is already using it in the form of protocols that are lockdown, shelter, hold, evacuate. If that sounds similar, you might be in a district that one of many that utilizes those programs. So those are like, campus wide, right? Those are, hey, we have this information. So Ben, you might, make the announcement, we are going into a lockdown, right? But you don't have information about what's happening in my classroom. And there might be an entirely different situation going on. So that's really, I think, where we have seen folks kind of breathe a little bit and realize, okay, within these protocols, I do have the ability and I do have tools that I can make use of should my circumstances change. As we know, crisis is not static, right? It changes, it's dynamic. And so we want people to feel equipped. So it's really, really an interesting part of that mind shift, I think, conversation. Another big part of that mind shift is what we see it doing, I would say, kind of culturally with the larger group of stakeholders that support safety. So I'd love you to talk, Jason, a little bit about what that does for collaboration between groups like school administrators, classroom teachers, safety leadership teams, first responders, school-based mental health, all these really important kind of like sub teams and stakeholders that we have ideally as our teammates in safety, but how this has been a little bit of a game changer in some of the communities that we've worked with and brought this approach to.
Sure. I think what this does is kind of like a threat assessment team, where you want to bring a holistic approach to a threat assessment, right? You want to bring this holistic approach to school safety, and bringing those key stakeholders in the room, because no one knows our students better than our bus drivers, better than our nurses, better than our teachers. So if we're making decisions globally without bringing those people to the room, without bringing those voices who are in the classroom every day or taking our kids home every day, we're missing an opportunity, but we're also missing buy-in, and allowing them to give their perspective or their thoughts. You've now created buy-in. And it also allows them to have these small conversations, such as, how could we stay safe on a bus? How could we stay safe in a classroom, in a cafeteria? Because those are the people that are going to see our kids every day, be able to talk to our kids every day. So I think it's all about buy-in and that holistic approach to school safety that allows these conversations to be in one place in a room and have that similar understanding with fidelity that we can push this out, and having everybody talking the same language, speaking the same language, and helping our kids, where it's not just pushed from a global perspective. And the school board office says we have to do this, so we're reluctantly doing this. No, you have buy-in, because all of our staff want to be safe. So if we empower them and give them tools to help our kids, we're empowering everybody.
Well said. Well said. So Ben, I'd love for you to kind of help us put a bow on the conversation here. And for those folks listening who are thinking about opening the conversation to options based, maybe they've got, their response protocols down pat. They do their lockdown drills, but they are ready now to have the difficult conversation, to let people express out loud, well, I don't feel so good about, what if there's a lockdown and I'm in the hallway and I can't get back in my classroom? What options do I have? That can be overwhelming, right? First of all, let's just honor that there are very real reasons why it can feel overwhelming to kind of embark on this journey and explore options-based programs. So for those who are interested, but maybe not sure where to start, what would you say would be kind of those first practical steps to begin building this kind of readiness?
Yeah. So first thing I would say is, if you don't have a strong relationship with your sheriff's office, get a strong relationship with the office, and because it has to be a team approach from a 30,000 foot view. Because the reality is, the sheriff's office or your local police department is going to have far, far more experience dealing with emergency situations, stressful situations that involve folks' safety being in jeopardy, far more than any school division will have. And so once you've established that, it's really, and then kind of dialing down the individual or the school-based level, is really opening those conversations and having those conversations that really, in any emergency situation, you're going to want to make some decisions that might not be that standard response that is really scripted out. And so it's better to do it now and have that conversation and think about it than it is when we're in that situation, right? You don't want to be froze because it says I'm supposed to be in a lockdown, but yet now the fire alarm's going off, right? And so now we get in this, talk about decision paralysis. It's like, what do I do? Because the fire alarm's going off and that tells me to do one thing, but the raptor's telling me lock down, and so therefore I should do something else. Like,
right, and I don't have a script for that. You didn't give me a script for that, so now I don't know what to do, right?
Yes, and, and there's a million different things that can happen. Let's not even go with the tragedy. Let's just go with, there's a weather event outside and a tree limb, blows through the window, right? And so then that teacher reacts one way because a tree limb came through a window. They set off raptor to whatever it may be, hold, secure. They think they do something, right? And they act, but then the teacher at the other end of the hallway, what's going on? Like, I don't even know why there is a raptor emergency at this point. And so their minds start to think about what could be going on and why this was set off. And you have these communication tools and whatnot, but they still have to react to the situation that's in front of them, which is chances are going to be very different. And so the ability to kind of think through that idea that if, when, then I'm going to react this way, but if, when, I'm going to react this way when it's that way in front of me, but it's not that way in front of me, but I've got this information here saying that I should react that way. And so that it really goes back to that idea that Jason was talking about earlier with the critical thinking and giving people the ability and the permission, if you will, to react to the situation in front of them, and understanding that we adopt this as a division, and therefore we're going to support you. Because at the end of the day, I think that's really what it's about. The teacher wants to know that they're doing what's right for their kids and that they're going to be supported when they make those decisions.
Exactly. So I want to unpack some very Virginia specific language that you're sharing there, because one of the many unique, and I used to work in Virginia, so one of the unique things about schools in Virginia is they're not districts. It's a division system. So it's synonymous. But when you hear been talking about the divisions, you can translate in your mind to districts, but also too, you mentioned numerous times in that response about a specific technology tool, Raptor, that your district employs to alert, to organize those protocols, to inform folks, and there are lots of great ones out there. I know you guys have had that one for quite some time, and it does align really nicely to those response protocols, as well as supporting an options-based protocol there as well too. So lots of really important things to think through from that kind of district leadership lens. So thank you for that, Ben. Now, Jason, did you want to add to that?
I do, if it's okay.
Yes, please.
So my suggestion would be start small, have those conversations with all the key stakeholders, small drills, small exercises. It doesn't even have to be people moving around. It could be conversations with a tabletop exercise. Where we started was one middle school who had a lot of questions, who was very proactive and wanted to do a lockdown during transition time. That's where we started. And we collectively had conversations of what does that look like? How do we prepare students? How do we prepare staff? How do we prepare parents and get that notification and get buy-in from parents? Because it's out of the norm. Everybody, when do we have our lockdown drills? When everything's in that neat package. Whenever everybody's in a classroom, the bell is already rung. We know where everyone's at. So accountability, we know we'll be at 100%. But the questions were happening. Well, what if we're not in a classroom? What if we're outside? What if we're in a hallway, gymnasium, cafeteria? That list goes on and on. So we finally said, let's find out. So it took months, a lot of notifications, a lot of hard conversations with various stakeholders, and to make sure none of our kids were traumatized, make sure we had good accountability, and ultimately parent buy-in, but ultimately to make sure everyone was able to grow and learn from that exercise. And we feel it went very well. I was in the hallway when we did the exercise. I mean, the total exercise lasted 14 minutes. We had around 200 students evacuate, and we had people there to kind of corral them when they went out. But within 45 seconds, the halls were completely vacant. You could not hear it. You couldn't hear a pin drop in there. And all the kids had used a tool that we had gave them with 2 training sessions of get out, keep out, hot out, 45 seconds. And within minutes, we had 79% accountability through Raptor. And that's including kids that weren't there that day. So the accountability was likely higher. It took planning, and it took beginning this at a very small scale, small conversations. We didn't roll this out to all schools at one time. We didn't immediately try a transition drill. Start small.
I think that's such sound advice. Start small. I like also though that you chose very specifically a school within your division or district that really already had a level of readiness and a level of interest, right? There were already those conversations, really good conversations happening, and leadership that wanted to be able to provide answers and was ready to learn. I also like how you explained that we need to go into these when we're doing a drill, when we're doing an exercise, when we're doing an activity, a tabletop activity. It should always be, what can we learn from this, and then after that activity or exercise, okay, what's the debrief? What can we take away? What can we change or tweak as we move forward? Because we are schools at the end of the day. It is all about learning and growing. So because Ben is an assistant superintendent,
you never know when he has to leave.
Just in true form, some bell went off, right? And he is answering the call right now. So I'm going to leave it to you, Jason, to bring us to the 60-second sound off. So, if you just had 60 seconds to explain to a school leader why options-based training matters, or maybe what even might be the risk of sticking with kind of that old school mindset of like a prescribed if then protocol or means of handling a crisis, what would it be that you would say in those 60 seconds?
we can't script everything that could possibly happen. We can't put it in a neat package. We can't predict every situation that a student or a staff member would be placed in. Well, and we can't put everything on teachers to say you need to keep your students safe, because what if they're not there? What if they're not available to do that? What if they freeze in that crisis? And it's ultimately up to the kids to make the decision. And we can look across many crises across our country where students did take a lead role and did make good decisions. They made their decision off of life experience or that emotion that they felt at that time. We have to give kids options. They're going to make decisions. We want them to make the right decisions. And if we empower them to say, listen, you do have the autonomy to make good decisions, and we don't have to traumatize them to do that. But if we give them tools in their tool belt to make good decisions, no matter where they are, whether it's in school, movie theater, a restaurant, home, house of worship, whatever that is, we are potentially saving lives.
Well said. Couldn't have done it better. This has been an amazing conversation with Ben Thompson, Assistant Superintendent in Frederick County Schools in Virginia, and Captain Jason Cornwell from the Sheriff's Department there in Frederick, Virginia as well. Amazing. Can't wait to come back to this conversation and listen to it over and over again. Thank you for what you all do to keep our schools safe and sound.
Thanks for having us.